you have a very nice way of sticking to your guns, valuing people's contributions, and yet not apologizing for like seeing things differently. Can you see that?
I think that I have matured into that a bit. So I think I've gained some confidence in terms of the work that I do and the work that a group is doing. I think I have a very protective mama bear instinct. Hopefully it's not helicopter parenting, but so if I'm working with a group and that group has put something together, I feel like I need to defend, support whatever the group has done.
You just heard Jennifer Thompson from the University of Maryland Global Campus in Largo, Maryland. My podcast partner, Garth Neufeld, conducted a Part 2 interview with Jen for this episode number 149 of Psych Sessions, Conversations About Teaching and Stuff. Stay tuned for so much more.
The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by Macmillan Learning Psychology. Introducing Macmillan Learning's Achieve First Psychology, setting a whole new standard for integrating assessments, activities, and analytics into your teaching. One way Achieve does this is through new goal setting and reflection surveys. Pre-built and easy to assign, these surveys help students define and attain their own personal goals for the class, while giving instructors insights into each student's academic skills and emotional well-being. The goal setting and reflection surveys are just one tool in Achieve's suite of reports and insights, and one example of how Achieve goes well beyond just delivering first-rate class-to-class course materials. For a preview of Achieve for Psychology, go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions. That's all lowercase, macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions.
The Psych Sessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. Psych Sessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter.
Hi, Jennifer Thompson. Welcome back to part 2.
Hi, Garth. How are you?
Well, I'm good. And, we just restarted because you had congratulated the Psych Sessions family for figuring out how to do this in a pandemic. Because one of the things that we did was these video interviews using Zoom or some other technology in order to conduct these interviews. And that's really great. But there are some challenges. And one of those challenges is just sound issues over the internet and whatever. So we ran into one of those. And but we're going to start again. And this is part 2. And Jennifer, if you don't know, Dr. Thompson is from the University of Maryland Global Campus, and is a good friend and colleague, and we worked on a bunch of stuff together. But I'm also really curious as to what's gone on since part 1, which was a couple of years ago. And so that's why I wanted to talk with you again. Now, I asked you this before, and then we had to kind of abandon ship here. But what exactly do you remember about part 1 of our interview? Because in preparation, we don't always do this. Only important people get preparation.
Okay.
But I really didn't want to cover some of the same things, and that was over a couple of years ago that we talked about it. So I wanted to re-listen to your first episode, our first interview with you. What do you recall about that interview?
I think it was 2019, and we were in person, believe it or not, at the APA building in Washington, D.C., and I was talking with Eric Landrum, and our good friend Jane Hallinan was in attendance. Mostly just to give me grief. And we were at, I feel like it was the first meeting of the APA Introductory Psychology Initiative, the IPI, the first expanded meeting. where an awful lot of preliminary work was done for that project that I feel like has gone on over the past several years and has sort of recently, I don't want to say come to a conclusion, but moved on to its next phase of dissemination and training.
Yeah. So that was December then, right? Was it December?
So. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been December 2018 was when that interview was. So I'm sorry, I'm way off. This is going to be 3.5 years later.
Craziness.
I can't believe it.
I really can't either.
It was surreal actually re-listening to that, thinking about what happened in the world between then and now. So that was still a year before the pandemic kind of started, but it was weird. It's weird to listen back to those kinds of things. And, oh yeah, that's what life was like. And to have an actual record of what life was like beforehand. So this is Jen and I talking post-pandemic, and that was us pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's, I think everyone says it seems like forever ago and just yesterday all at the same time that we were able to gather in person and have these conversations and podcasts and everything where you could be in the same room as someone.
Yeah. And I also can't believe that IPI meeting was, 3.5 years ago, because there's been just so much that we did since then, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think when we met, we had no idea that it was going to become a 3-year initiative and not a 3-day summit. I'm glad it was. It went through a lot of iteration and review and really thoughtful process. APA was wonderful in that they never put pressure on us to, you have 6 months and you have to finish this or anything. You and Regan were very supportive and guiding sort of to a natural process. And, I spent probably the last year after the project was quote unquote done. For some people, my group, so I worked on the student learning outcomes and assessment groups, my group and myself and Kristen Whitlock, who was the other co-chair of that group, spent a lot of time working with APA and getting those student learning outcomes approved as APA policy, which is a huge undertaking for anyone who's ever done that. And that was really a really nice, pretty bow on that work for me. And the work I did on that and the book is probably the thing I'm most proud of in my career, really.
Yeah.
It was a really exciting moment for me. So.
Yeah. And for those folks who want to hear more from that group, we did record some of those folks on your team, who we affectionately refer to as the woolly mammoths. And so that group, I can't remember exactly. You can look back in the Psych Sessions archives and find out when that was, but it was right after you all got, that APA adopted those outcomes as policy. You know what, Jen, really interesting. I had worked, do you remember that there was a time before policy for those outcomes where around APA, they were saying, don't call these APA outcomes, because no one really expected, I think is fair, that APA would just kind of adopt these as policy. And this would be the new APA policy for intro psych. I think that it was like, we're taking you all were just taking a shot at it, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's just try.
Yeah, we discussed a lot whether we were going to go for policy or not. And really, we initially said we wouldn't because there were a lot of steps involved and we weren't sure of the process and procedure. And it was sort of, the student learning outcomes were really a work product of a task force under the Board of Educational Affairs. And we really did not go into it planning to have them approved as policy. But the more we talked about it, and I think this has made it easier for APA as well, it got every man on the street or every person on the street would refer to them as the APA intro SLOs, right? As we would talk to people, I know there's this intro work going on and APA is coming out with SLOs. And we had to keep saying, well, they're not really APAs, SLOs, even though they sponsored the work that ended up in the SLOs. And so this just really makes it a much more seamless pathway for everybody.
Yeah.
Those of us who are used to using the APA guidelines, it just makes sense.
It sure does. So I ran into a situation where I had created some resources for someone for a publisher. It was a video series, and I was just talking to Sue Ursillo over at APA about why these didn't have APA's learning outcomes for introductory psychology or whatever. And I was racking my brain trying to figure out, like, why didn't they, and I have a terrible memory. But then it struck me, this was a very weird time in that time between when they got done and when they became policy. And was it Sue Franz who initially thought you all should go for policy? Was that her push, or was it all of y'all's push for that?
All I remember is that it was a real conversation between us, and we really did go back and forth many times. Whether it was, I feel like one meeting we would be like, no, we're not going to do this. And the next meeting we talked to Martha, and all of a sudden we'd be taking incremental steps, whether we meant to or not, toward getting those approved. And
well, the thing is, they don't get out there if you don't get that. If you don't get APA to endorse it, they are just not going to be adopted widely across publishers, across high school and college, and yeah.
Yeah, and it made a difference, right? At the same time, the National High School Standards Group was meeting, and we were meeting with them to let them know where we were standing, and they adopted a lot of that framework. That College Board AP new framework coming out in, I think, fall 2023 has adopted the IPI themes and SLOs. And so had they not been adopted as policy, it would have put a kink in an awful lot of pieces.
Right. Yeah. What was that process? I think we covered most of this stuff in that other episode, but real quick, from your perspective, let me ask a better question. What was valuable to you about going through that process and kind of being one of the co-leads on getting something adopted as policy?
Honestly, as frustrating as it was at times, because we always want to think we're putting our best work forward and can't possibly get any better, the review and revision process was helpful to me. It really gave me a lot of time to look at what we had written, produced, be very proud of it, but to also realize that there were areas that maybe were not as clear. So part of it is, right, you submit them to all of the boards and committees across APA, and even though it opened it up for public comment. So there are just individual members of APA who would comment on them. And I think that a lot of that feedback was really valuable. Some of it was validating. We got a lot of support. One nice thing was we got support for having them at all, for having intro student learning outcomes. So that was something we were really glad to hear, that it wasn't just us thinking this was something really important to have. Feedback, though, from other people that I wouldn't always hear from, wouldn't normally hear from, the Board of Scientific Affairs, maybe, or the Board of Psychology and Public Interest. So groups that I didn't always have a direct conduit to were reviewing, making recommendations, and it really gave us a chance to either think about making those changes or thinking about why those changes weren't appropriate, and helping to center us in our work.
Yeah. We're getting a dose of that right now on Guidelines 3.0, right? Where we're getting feedback. But I completely agree with you that responding to that feedback is not just, it's not an exercise in we like that, we don't like that. It is, that's valuable for this reason. And that is not a change we're going to make for this reason. That's quite an intense process, actually, to be able to justify either way.
It is. It is. And what's interesting is, much like a journal review, we have to write a response, right? For every reviewer who said something, you write a response and you say, thank you for the great suggestion. We've made these changes, or thank you for the great suggestion, but that's out of the scope of what we're doing. Or, really it's an intro level course that's a little beyond, or a great idea. We've actually made that change in several places now in the document. So even writing those responses to reviewers is helpful in clarifying your thinking and your reasoning behind the decisions that you made in doing the revisions or not.
I told you I just listened to our first interview from whatever, close to 4 years ago. And if I recall correctly, there was a time where you did consider counseling or clinical psych, right? And then you went for experimental. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So because, and I just listened to it so I can quote it to you. But one of the reasons you gave was because some of the kind of the emotional things that people would be bringing up, you'd probably have a hard time going home and just feeling burdened by, right? So that's one of it. Well, I'm just thinking about a couple of things. I'm going to put it together here. This process of writing these letters and saying, hey, thank you for your great suggestion, and this wasn't adopted because A, B, and C. This is a real interpersonal skill set. I have a feeling that you use this skill, whatever that muscle, whatever that thing is, in your job. But I've also seen it in meetings. You and I are involved in a project right now for intro psych. I've also seen it in meetings when things are not going to plan, or when people have ideas or are taking time that are maybe we would deem as kind of like off target or whatever. You are very diplomatic. You have a very nice way of sticking to your guns, valuing people's contributions, and yet not apologizing for seeing things differently. Is, first of all, can you see that, and is that something that you has always been a part of your skill set, or have you learned that somewhere?
I think that I have matured into that a bit. So I think I've gained some confidence in terms of the work that I do and the work that a group is doing. I think I have a very protective mama bear instinct. Hopefully it's not helicopter parenting, but so if I'm working with a group and that group has put something together, I feel like I need to defend, support whatever the group has done. I do. So it's funny. Years ago, I was going to be asked to teach a face-to-face section, and I say face-to-face because most of my teaching is online now, a face-to-face section of social psychology. And I'd never taught social psychology. And this is after I had my PhD, and it was like my first year at was UMGC, University College, is now Global Campus, same place, different name. And I was sitting next to a faculty member who'd been there a couple more years than I had. And I was like, I don't know if I want to accept this class. I feel bad not accepting because I know he's in a tough spot, but I've never taught it before. And she looked at me and she said, Jennifer, you have a PhD. And I said, yes. And she said, these are students who are, for us, they're adult students. So they've had some college typically. They might be bringing in 20 credits, 30, 40. They've maybe had some college. You know more about social psychology than they do. I was like, oh, okay. All right. So she gave me a little bit of a permission to be, I don't want to say a figure of authority, but to bring a little bit more of that. Oh, I actually do know more than they do. Now, teaching adult students when you're younger is interesting because here I was teaching human sexuality to people in my class who were in their 40s and 50s, and I'm 27 or whatever. And they're like, yeah, I have 5 kids and, I'm on my 3rd marriage. And I'm like, well, you all know more about it than I do. So let me just sit back and listen. And there's something really valuable in that in teaching adult students. am really hearing about how psychology and the lessons in these courses apply to their lives. But it did give me a little confidence. I probably also have a thing where when I think I'm right, I might be a little stubborn. Be a little stubborn, so that might be
I may or may not have witnessed that once or twice.
May or may not. It might come across at times.
So, well, I think it's a really valuable skill set because we've all been in meetings with colleagues at our institutions nationally, where there's just a lot of maybe ego. There's a lot of just we've seen inappropriate things for sure, where people are fighting for something or believe in something and don't know how to articulate that without maybe getting personal or something like that. But I remember being in a meeting and being a little bit hot under the collar about something, but looking to you, and you handle things really, really well. So you're an administrator, right? Yeah. A different administrator than I was 4 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about that. So 4 years ago, what role? Well, actually, I want to back up because I listened to part one, because you were an adjunct professor for a while, right?
Yeah,
so what was your where was that at? Here
at University of Maryland University College and at the Community College of Baltimore County.
Okay, both
really, really valuable experiences.
Right. So from there, you got the full-time job.
Yeah, it was sort of strange, right? I would say it's serendipity. Eric would say, stop it. I was teaching adjunct for these two places. My boss at UMGC, there was a program director and then an assistant academic director. The assistant academic director sort of suddenly left, and he stood in front of a meeting and encouraged us all, said, there's an opening, feel free to apply. And I did. And like a couple weeks later, he actually emailed me, thank goodness, and said, I thought you were going to apply for this. And I said, I did submit my application. And he's like, well, wait a minute. So he had to actually contact HR, and they had put it in, I don't know, a round file or something, but it hadn't gotten through to him. So thank goodness he reached out to me and said something and thought I was thinking of applying. And I ended up so I was hired as an assistant academic director. As things happened, 3 years later, our assistant dean moved up to be associate dean. So my boss, who was the academic director, moved up to be assistant dean. And so then I took over as acting academic director for a while. Academic director of what? Of psychology. Right. Yeah. And that title changed over the years to program chair and then program director, but it was all the same role. Okay. They just like to change a lot of titles there. Yeah. I hope all those title changes came with like salary increases. No, they did not. I mean, you meant to say. Just a new business card. What you meant to say was, I'm very happy with my salary. I am very. In case anybody from my institution is listening. I am very. So I think about the time I met you, then you were doing the what did you say? Did it turn into coordinator at some point? So no, it was just program director. Program director. So when you and I met at SNAP, so many years ago, that was my role. Yep. So program director, and just remind us, it's a big program. It is a big program. We have enrollments of about 14,000 a year. I think I have 6,000, 7,000 majors. Yep. 120 adjunct faculty. I'm trying to think how many sections, but many hundred sections. And these are online. This is an online program. Primarily online. We do have courses that we offer in a hybrid format. So we meet face-to-face once a week, and the rest of the course is carried out online. And we also have courses globally in Europe and Asia that are taught in a face-to-face. Okay. mostly.
Okay. So what was your online teaching experience before you kind of took that on? Because that's a big piece of it, right?
Yeah, I had none.
Okay.
And that was one of my concerns. I remember when I was being interviewed for the job and they asked me, why I was interested. And one of it was, I want a good experience with online education. And this is in 2006.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't as much of a thing. Well, it certainly wasn't as much of a thing as it is now after the pandemic. UMGC had been doing it for 10 years. Since 1994, 95. And those were they would call them like telephony courses, right? Like you would actually call in they would actually have it like on a conference call, you would have your class. And I said, I don't have online experience. And the person who hired me was very reassuring and said, that's great. We're looking for face-to-face instructors, but you would definitely get that experience. And I just sort of built it up from there.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I'm getting to is that, and that I want to ask you about, is how did University of Maryland Global Campus, I'm guessing that it's not only the psychology program that is like heavily online, that there are other programs that are online as well. I imagine you all fared pretty well from day one during the pandemic. Like it wasn't a huge shift.
It was not a pivot. Yeah. So we have 90 programs. They all have at least some components online. Some of them are completely online, like psychology. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to, really it was business as usual, other than the fact that physically being in our offices, we all went home and worked remotely. The learning experience for our students didn't change a whole lot. Hybrid courses were conducted via Zoom. So that was one change. But again, those are a really small percentage of our sections. So really, I have to say, we weathered that change probably easier than a lot of places do. We didn't have to scramble to do emergency online. We've really been doing distance education for a long time. So. Yeah. So program director, how many faculty did you oversee? 120.
120 faculty. And then from that, because you're not in that position anymore, was there another step before this current position, or
no,
was it straight into this one? Okay.
It was straight to this one. So about a year ago.
So now you hate psychology.
I ran away. No, about a year ago, our department chair of sciences left, and I took over in the acting position. I've been in the permanent position since October. So, and our sciences involve, everything from natural sciences, biology, gerontology, social sciences, political science. We even have nursing is under sciences, psychology, sociology.
Yeah.
It sort of runs the gamut. So it's a lot of different things going on.
Okay. So what is a day in the, or I guess you work from home, right? You work in your home office.
I am. So we have, we're officially selling our building. We have two buildings. We have a headquarters building and an academic center. We're selling the academic center, which makes me sad because it was a beautiful building. But we are officially remote and hybrid employees. So for the foreseeable future, this is my office. This is my basement.
Okay. And what do you do? I was going to say during a day, but maybe a week. What are some of the things that you are your responsibilities for your position?
I think you've talked to me more than once on the day when I'm on my 7th or 8th meeting for the day. Yes. It's a lot of meetings. I meet with my the program directors who work with me. Some I meet with every week, some I meet every 2 weeks, every month. So sort of keep on top of that. I still deal with student concerns and issues, faculty concerns and issues. Now I just think I have the thing I really like, there's two things I really like about a job. One is I get to know more about more things, right? So instead of just knowing a lot about psychology, I now know more about our biology and biotechnology program. I'm still learning about nursing. It's complicated, but I know more about our nursing program and what's going on. I know more about the initiatives across the university. I also, the second thing I like is I like being able to have a role in the leadership of the school. So we only have 3 department chairs in the School of Arts and Sciences, myself, and then communications, arts and humanities, and then public service, education and public service. So it's really the 3 of us and a dean and an associate dean. And we sort of do the academic leadership for the school. And I'm really enjoying that piece of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a trajectory here, Jen. So what is the ultimate goal? Like, what are your aspirations?
I'd like to continue to be challenged. But the most important thing for me, honestly, is to feel like I'm in a role where I'm being heard, where I'm making contributions, where I can support others, where I feel supported and appreciated. I mean, I really don't have, they asked me during the interview for this, what my next goal was. Was it to be dean? I really don't have those kind of goals in head. I just want to be, sounds so stupid. I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. I want to enjoy my family, enjoy my random pets running around, enjoy, the role I am now. I have this job at UMGC, but I have work with you and Aaron Richmond. I have work on the APA guidelines 3.0. I have work with College Board. I have work, so I'm still able to flex my psychology muscles in a way that interests me, in a way that allows me to connect with colleagues, which, you said before, interpersonal things. I'm all about the people. I'm all about building relationships. So that's what matters to me, even in work, right? So as long as I have good relationships with the people I'm working with, I don't really care what position I'm in.
Right. How many hours do you work a week? Because you do a lot of stuff. Are you able to find that balance to enjoy your family and your animals and all those kinds of things?
I think it's harder now that we're working at home, or that I'm working at home, to sort of split. It was easier to leave the office, but I have to tell you, I've always been a person that if I get an email after my work hours, 9 times out of 10, I will respond really, really quickly. I do value responsiveness in others. I am getting better at saying this could wait till tomorrow. Nothing I'm doing is life or death. It can wait till tomorrow if I approve a registration or whatever. There are a lot of hours worked, but there are a lot of hours. I'm rewatching NYPD Blue. I don't know why, but I am. I don't know. It showed up on Hulu and I was like, sure, why not? So I watch an episode of that a day. And I do read. I'm in a book club. So I do try to find the little things that
you take a vacation tomorrow. You're leaving tomorrow.
I do. I'm leaving for Michigan tomorrow to see my dad and my family.
Yeah.
And to do a little hanging out at the lake. And I'm glad to be able to do that now, right? So now that COVID is, I don't want to say it's waning a bit, or at least it's not
as severe, maybe
not quite as leading to severe outcomes. There is a little bit more flexibility. So I've definitely taken advantage of that this year. I've been getting out of the house a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is the stuff I wanted to talk about, because it seems like your reach was for what you said, 14,000 students. And now you're like, in some ways, you're touching how many students now? Like 50,000 students in the science?
50,000 times 9. I can't do the math that fast.
A lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. It is a lot. So under my department is mathematics and statistics and biology, right? So both of those are huge general education opportunities. in our biology classes alone, we have like 14,000, 17,000 enrollments a year, maybe. So, I mean, that's just one program, and I have, I think, 11 under me or whatever. So it's a lot of students.
Oh, I have a question. What's happening? What are you learning at that high level, kind of those high level meetings? I know you and I were talking about, you go to like conferences, and you go to different kinds of conferences now in this role, right? And you were talking about some major changes that your college was thinking about making. Or your university was thinking about making. So what are those kinds of things that you talk about at that level?
Well, so we have, I never thought of myself as much of a strategic thinker. I was really more a tell me what to do and I'll get it done. My new boss has disabused me of that notion and said, what are you talking about? Whenever you say, what are we doing about this? Or what are we going to do about that? She's like, you're thinking strategically. So we've taken on these strategic initiatives for next year. One is to totally redesign our general education program. Really looking at the knowledge, skills, abilities, and dispositions of the students that we want. We want, in the ideal world, someone from UMGC would apply for a job and someone would go, oh, they're from UMGC. They must be really good at blank. And we want to be able to fill in those blanks with these general education requirements. And it's really so much in how you talk about that. The other initiative that we're continuing is initiatives around the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to, it's multi-pronged at any organization, but in education, it's not only internal in terms of staff and faculty, it's also in terms of the curriculum, it's feeds into communications, into collaboration, and how we work with one another and how we support our students. So it's really, really wide reaching. And that's another thing that's sort of continuing on this year.
You mentioned knowledge, skills, abilities, and dispositions. I feel like I should know what this is, but I'm going to say it anyway. What about the dispositions part? I know usually it's knowledge, skills, and abilities. Talk to me about dispositions.
So it's interesting. We have a new president as of January 2021. So he started right in the middle of the pandemic, which is kind of interesting. He didn't go in an office building for a year. He didn't set foot in the president's office. And he actually is the one that came around and sort of talked to us about KSADs, knowledge, skills, abilities, and dispositions. And I wasn't even really sure what he meant by dispositions, but sort of it has to do with habits of mind, let's say. If we want a student to go out in the world and be curious, right? Curiosity might be a disposition. If we want them to be able to be a really good team player, well, someone could say that's a skill, but there's also maybe dispositions that would lead a person to be good at those things. You can't always teach dispositions, but you can maybe enhance them, grow them mostly. And I think this is so important with everything we do, including skills, is tell students that they have them.
Yeah.
Right. And reinforce, these are the skills you have. These are the dispositions you have. I think the knowledge piece is a little bit easier for students, right? Because they're like, I just passed this test, or I just wrote this project, I got an A, I know what that is. But they don't then walk out and go, oh, look, I have project management skills. I have skills in leadership, in collaboration, in research, in analysis, whatever. So I think we just need to do a better job of communicating that to our students.
I'm sure you have really competent colleagues that you work with day in and day out, but does your psychology background, particularly your background in teaching, learning, cognitive psych, assessment, and what you've learned there, does that transfer well over to what you're doing now? Like how have those experiences made you successful in this role outside of psychology? And we'll be right back.
I know, right? Like pregnant pause. I think that it's helped me a lot so a big part of my previous role as program director of psychology was designing the curriculum, the classrooms, the learning experiences. Certainly knowledge of cognitive psychology, of learning science, of watching Steve Chu's videos helped me in designing those classrooms that would be transformative for our students, that would help them to apply what they've learned. When I first started at UMGC, our dean at the time was like, I want a cognitive psychologist to come and talk to people about andragogy, which is adult education. And my boss turned to me and he's like, aren't you a cognitive psychologist? And I was like, oh my gosh. So I hadn't even been there 2 months, and I got up and I gave this big presentation on pedagogy and adult learning. But actually in reading Malcolm Knowles and getting ready for the presentation, I learned a lot about adult learning from that very first moment. And I've remembered a lot of it and implemented a lot of it in our classes. And I talk to other people about it. Sometimes I'm more receptive than others. I mean, I'll pick learning styles. For example, we happened to have been in a meeting of the entire school, and our dean said something, and one of the other program directors said something about learning styles. And I may or may not have jumped out of my seat, grabbed the microphone and said, learning styles don't exist. And then proceeded to have a feisty discussion with this person about what I meant by that. And she's like, yes, they do. And I was like, well, I don't mean they don't exist so much as, there's no evidence that they actually improve performance, but whatever. But so unfortunately, sometimes knowing that stuff actually causes more issues with colleagues that don't have that understanding. So,
what about assessment specifically? Are you doing a lot of assessment in this role, or does that fall outside of your?
Actually, it's funny they mentioned that, because we just sort of got assigned to work groups for this general education thing, and I happen to be on the outcomes and assessment work group. I know that will come as a huge surprise to you. But through my work with APA, actually, at the Summit for the National Assessment of Psychology back in, was that 2017?
Yeah, that sounds right.
2016, something like that. Yeah. It really all started there. Really understanding that. In 2011, my university took on a huge curriculum redesign project where I was really exposed to backwards design for the first time. So that would be, I would think, my first real exposure to assessment in a broader sense than just like creating a test or an assignment for a student, but really having a broader sense of assessment and assessing outcomes. And then that piece led me to SNAP, which then has led to further work in the IPI and guidelines. And now I see outcomes everywhere I go.
Right.
I think in terms of what do I want my students to know out there that I'm responsible for in here, or to do out there that I'm responsible for in here, that certainly has colored how I talk to people about curriculum design and that sort of thing. So that's the big pieces of assessment that I'm on my school's assessment committee, which is unfortunate for them because I tend to ask a lot of questions about assessment. I know just enough to be dangerous is the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your general sense of how much folks do know about at that level about assessment? Are most people pretty, proficient at assessment?
I think, in my head is Jane Hallinan has that beautiful slide that she uses that looks like emojis, right? It goes from a smiley face to like someone really like weeping, and it's like assessment enthusiast and assessment detractor and that sort of thing. And Jane, I apologize, I'm getting those terms wrong. And I think it really ranges like that. You can go from people who are in our academic quality group who think assessment every day, to people like me who know a lot about assessment because it's part of the psychology background too, right? You get exposed to that really early from different angles and aspects. And then there are other program directors who maybe just aren't as thoughtful about it, or are doing assessment and don't realize they're doing assessment, or do it just because it's a necessary evil, and don't always see the benefits. But I think that the people that don't always see the benefits are the ones who aren't maybe encouraged really to look at the data and do something with it. They're not encouraged to complete the loop, right? I mean, the whole point of doing assessment is going back and making the changes. And if they're not given the time or resources to go and make the changes, then assessment becomes worthless to them.
Right. But even the fact that you understand that the purpose of assessment is to make changes, that may not occur to someone who it wants to be a part of assessing just to see what we're doing here. Right. So although we all have heard that word, that phrase now, closing the loop ad nauseum,
Yes.
but I'm not sure we always are tying it back to assessment practices. Can you give us an update on what's going on with project assessment, and are you still involved in that?
I don't even know if I'm still listed as an editor on the website, so that should tell you how connected I am to it. We haven't gotten, honestly, I feel like the Committee on Associate and Baccalaureate Education at APA could do a little bit to reinvigorate it. We are hoping that some assessments that have come out of the IPI work will end up in PASS. You know, I do hear every once in a while, I'll go to a conference or meeting and someone will excitedly type in the chat, "Hey, have you found PASS that has these really great resources?" And it makes my heart sing. But, you know, it becomes one of those things where it's just another one of a list of resources. And so sometimes it falls to the bottom, it heads back to the top, it lands somewhere in the middle, it gets lost. I think there's some really great resources there. I used it myself recently for to look at the assessment for associate's degrees. That is in there. It's sort of a overarching assessment. And I thought that it had some really interesting information, and it's a great resource, and my passwords still work, so it's excellent. But I think really what we need to do and what we need to encourage people to do is to submit assessments to it. I think there are some fantastic assessments, assignments out there that we don't even know exist. And how wonderful would it be for people to share them with one another? And PASS is just one way to do that.
Okay. So a couple other questions I had. One of them is, you mentioned CABE just now. You were on CABE for 4 years, right?
I was, yeah. Good memory.
Yeah. Again, just listen to episode 1. So not that great a memory. But so as you look back on your time on CABE, kind of what are your takeaways? Like what worked about it? What do you think maybe didn't work? Because CABE, as we discussed in the first time on the first interview, it grew out of this kind of stopping one thing and starting another thing. And so you were very early on, and now it is, I'm guessing it kind of takes on the personality of whatever that group is at the time. Mm-hmm. There's also been leadership changes at APA. So what are your kind of reflections on CABE? Kind of while you were there, since you were there, is it working?
So I will say that my experience with CABE was fantastic. Once again, the best thing I took away from it was relationships, was some work products that I was proud of, that I felt like we were going in the right direction with, was a real connection with APA, which I hadn't really felt since I was a student. So those were all really very, very valuable to me. I mean, the relationships I formed in CABE are the ones that are strongest, that I still hold very dear. I think it is still working. I know that they put together some really good programming for the APA convention. I'm always interested to hear what they're up to. I have heard that there are parts and pieces of things that started when I was there that came to fruition, and that's wonderful to see. The skillful psychology student, for example, is something that we had talked about when I was there, and to see Karen Knopfel and her team really put that together and put that out there. And that's something that I think is so valuable for our students. It's in every one of my psychology courses now, so that students really are, again, hammering home the skills that they're getting as a student in psychology, so that they can turn around and talk about their skills to their families, or to potential employers, or to their commanders in the military. And I do think it works. And I think being part of APA governance is really interesting. I think it can make you feel very valued. The group itself, I thought, was great because of its diversity. And by that, I really mean diversity of perspectives, right? So it's 4 members from community colleges, 4 members from 4-year institutions. And I think, much like we talk about in psychology, the commonalities are almost greater than the differences. And so it's nice to be in a room where you're having the same issue as 3 other people, but then maybe someone else has already solved that problem. Or at the same time, you're in a room where issues of transfer come up for both sides, but they come up from different sides, right? So for the community colleges, it might be, I'm having trouble getting this course to be articulated to a 4-year program. And from the 4-year program, it might be like, I really wish that my students would come into the program with XYZ from the community colleges, and they're not. And so I think those transfer issues go both ways, but it's interesting to hear it from different perspectives. So being around that was really valuable to me. It was nice for me because I had taught for a community college, and UMGC is an open access institution. So we have a very similar student population to community colleges in some ways. So I was able to speak to both sides a little bit.
Yeah, I was wondering about, because I think in those rolling appointments or whatever, when you're on for a couple of years and then you're off, and especially if you're co-leading, which is part of the model, you want to, it's like being a president, I think, of the Society for the Teaching of Psychology, APA Division 2. You have ideas that you want to push forward, and you want to get some work done in a particular area. I can't imagine, though, over the years, and I think this happens, we see it at STP a lot, where somebody has an initiative, it's a good thing, and it gets a lot of attention, but the next year there's another thing and another thing after that, and so the resources pile up, right? The articles pile up, and which is fine. It's all a contribution. I think APA, it seems to me like CABE's ideas, they get worked out a little longer because of the oversight. They have a staff person, for example, yes, or staff people associated with them. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I mean, the nice thing is that even though the board changes, there, as you said, there are staff at APA who remain consistent and can be that connecting piece. The other nice thing about CABE is because not everyone rolls off at the same time. You usually have some continuity of the people who were there before, and this is what we were working on before. So that part is good as well. I like the STP model where the past president is still around, has a role in the society, because I think that's important to have that sort of historical contribution and that knowledge, and to be able to say, if like say the incoming president comes in with some new idea and the outgoing president has an idea that was tangential or maybe fits in, they might say, hey, I did this task force last year, they found XYZ, if you want to build on that or whatever. So I think maintaining those connections is important, and CABE does that well. For a few years after I left, there were still people on it that I had worked with. So I still saw that thread of continuity. And I think this next year might be the first year, or this current year, that no one is left that I was on with. But I do know that the primary staff person is still the same. And I know that Martha will keep them going, just like she has for all of us for so long.
Yeah, it always seems to me like CABE has a lot going on. I guess when you get 8 people in a room who are passionate about teaching psychology, you always, I think you have your own kind of pet projects and ideas that you want to like move forward, right? And so it's not super sexy to be like, welcome to CABE. Now, can you continue to work on somebody else's idea? But with that said, they are working on IPI stuff, even though many of them aren't directly kind of involved in the Introductory Psychology Initiative. I think, I did hear you say like you wish that CABE would give a little more attention back to PASS, the project assessment, because we don't want something like that to fall off, But then again, it's not all on them because we do have this continuity with a staff member and it's just a really valuable resource. I do appreciate that about the APA is that they don't tend to put their energy and money into things. I mean, I'm talking about our little section, our little area of the APA. They don't put their money and attention and energy into things that are going to just get left out to, die. So, yeah.
I mean, we talked at the very beginning of how IPI has not ended so much as entered this new phase of dissemination and training. And I've really seen it. I was very impressed to see, within the last year and a half, how many different initiatives have come out of APA and CABE in terms of, great, the IPI is here, now what? And they haven't left it behind. Instead, they're building upon it. They're doing training on it. They're really, I think, enhancing it and emphasizing it. And it's really nice to see that it wasn't just sort of, well, now the book is done, it's been left behind. It's really an acknowledgement that a book or a publication isn't the end, but rather just the beginning. And I've seen that.
Well, and you can trace it back, right? You can trace it back to the Puget Sound Conference, like what is it? I don't even know how many, was that year 2000 or something like that? Maybe it was 15, 20 years ago, but there are these threads. And of course, people come along and pick up those threads along the way and say, listen, this recommendation was made. And so we'd like to do this, but there is definitely that thread for what we're doing that APA follows. So, hey, I know I've basically had you for an hour or so. And I do want to ask though, is APA as an organization, is that something that you would like to continue to invest in moving forward? It seems like you enjoy your work there with them. You also live geographically pretty close. So, I don't know what my question is exactly, but you seem to thrive a little bit within APA, and you seem to like learning about its systems and how to get things done and participate in it. So what do you ever think about APA as in the future as far as career? And
I do. I'm not sure what roles there are for me, but I will continue to volunteer to work on initiatives as they need me. I'll continue to be here as a resource. The work on the guidelines has been really, really exciting. And I'm so glad to have been a part of it. It's still ongoing a bit. But it's been great work. It's work that I enjoy with people I enjoy. So I can't say anything bad about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jen, you do not disappoint ever. You have had so much going on in the last 4 years. I'm really glad that I got to talk to you about these changes and hear a little bit about what you have been up to, what you're doing now. I'm so glad you're keeping a foot in teaching of psychology, even with this new role, because you have so much to offer. And of course, it's been a pleasure to work with you on all these things. It's been really nice. So, yeah.
Highlight of my year, Garth.
Well, folks, this has been Jennifer Thompson from the University of Maryland Global Campus. And Jen, go enjoy a well-deserved holiday.
Thank you.